Hello, American Prestige listeners. It's Derek, joined as always by my friend and comrade Danny Bessner, and we're very pleased to welcome back to the program Sina Azodi. He is the assistant professor, I should say, of Middle East politics and the director of the Middle East Studies program at George Washington University. He's also the author of the very presciently published Iran and the Bomb, the United States, Iran, and the Nuclear Question. We're going to talk about that book today. Sina, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Good to be with you, Derek. Thank you for having me.
We were saying off mic, the timing here could not be more impeccable
Yeah.
in terms of the publication of this book.
I always thought it'd be a funny
But for
wag
the
the dog.
record, I had no collusion with Donald Trump.
Well, wouldn't
I
that be a
swear.
funny movie?
Like,
If like a
slip him a
podcast,
50 and be like, "Can you start a war? I got a book coming out." Like,
an author does like a wag the dog situation to like start a war so their book sells.
So, I mean, the book was written, you have an epilogue written after the 12-day war last year. And I don't want to get right into like how does the most recent war change or reflect on what you talked about. I do want to talk about the book first. So before we get into more contemporary stuff, what was your aim? What's the argument that you're advancing in writing this book?
Well, my initial aim was to show that if you're writing about a country's nuclear program or nuclear posture, you cannot marginalize and deprive yourself of so much information on the Iranian side. Imagine if you're writing a book on Russia's nuclear weapons program and you don't use a single Russian language, how the Russians are thinking, how the Russians are viewing the world, and what the Russians are saying among themselves. So the idea started when I was a graduate student, actually here at GW. And then I was writing on nuclear issues. I was always interested. And I quickly learned that most, if not all, the works on the Iranian nuclear program don't bother to check Iranian sources. And there's so much out there. Oral histories, memoirs. Zarif actually has a 6-volume work on the details of negotiations between Iran and P5+1. Hassan Rouhani, the former president, has an entire book dedicated to his negotiations with the Europeans in early 2000s. And I don't think that you can do the justice and write about Iranian nuclear program without actually consulting those sources. So that's what I'm trying to bring in and add to the literature. But I'm not using only Iranian sources. I'm using both American and Iranian sources to do an impartial and objective work. And my main argument is basically that the nuclear program of the Shah and the nuclear program of the Islamic Republic have not fundamentally, their objectives have not fundamentally changed. Yes, there was a revolution in 1979. Yes, the pro-West, pro-American monarchy was replaced by an Islamic revolution, but the threat perceptions have fundamentally remained the same. Both of them view Iran as isolated in a region. They believe that Iran is alone. If push comes to shove, Iran has to stand on its own feet. And the nuclear program is somehow the symbol of Iran's modernization. Now, the cast of characters have, of course, changed. The window dressing or the rhetoric has changed. For the Shah, the nuclear program was the symbol of Iran's westernization. For the Islamic Republic is the symbol of Iran's self-sufficiency and independence, so on and so forth. But the objectives have not changed. And this tells me that even if the regime changes in Iran, and the Islamic Republic goes and is replaced by whatever regime that you like, whether it's a monarchy, whether it's a democratic republic, whether it's an authoritarian regime, I think ultimately that regime will also pursue similar nuclear objectives.
It really does. I mean, you're trying to push back on reams of I use this term loosely, analysis in the U.S. that this is just a cadre of maniacs who want a nuclear bomb, and the instant they get one, they'll nuke,
Hmm.
Tel Aviv or something. And I think putting it in the context of the Shah and that program and the desire for modernization and westernization, there is a through line, I think, which is Iranian leaders on both sides of the revolution wanting to be treated as a normal country in some sense.
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
that's a flaky term, but the idea, a lot of the rhetoric, it seems like, that comes out of Iranian leaders today or over the last, let's say 10 years or even longer about the nuclear program is, look, we just want to have the same privileges under the non-proliferation treaty that everybody else does. We just want to be treated, we're willing to accept inspections, we're willing to accept these
Yeah.
other things,
Hmm.
but we don't want to be singled out as some uniquely dangerous, nefarious, bad actor.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. And what I try to actually show in this book, and even when you pay attention to the cover of the book, you don't see any angry looking Middle Eastern man with a nuclear mushroom in the background. It's rather it tries to show that, and I treat the Iranian leaders both under the Shah and the Islamic Republic as rational actors. That is, they think about their world, their surroundings, and they try to make the best decision at the time. Yes, I mean, you can, if you have the benefit of hindsight, you can go back and say whether a decision was prudent or not, but they actually think about the world. And most of the American and Western literature treats these guys as, some, as Secretary Rubio likes to call them, religious lunatics that want to bring the end of the world. And this is just not, anybody. I've seen respected scholars arguing that Iran, if they had nuclear weapons, they would launch on Israel because they're seeking martyrdom, and that would bring the end of the world. So they're just gonna launch nuclear weapons on Israel. And I actually show that this is not the case. And on issue of being treated as equal, it's a very sensitive topic for Iranians. It was very sensitive for the Shah. He constantly complained to the Americans that why are the Americans are treating Iran differently from Western countries. Islamic Republic is basically saying the exact same thing. They want Iran to be treated with respect, not a condescending attitude that I've seen from some Western, politicians or experts in this town. So this is what they want, and the reason is that regardless of the regime, regardless of the type of the government that Iran has or has had and will have, Iran is an inherently imperial state. It identifies itself as an imperial state and acts as if it is still an empire. The decisions made by the Iranian leaders are, in a sense, to expand Iran's influence in the region because they think that they have the right. Now, whether it's true or not, I'm not arguing for that. But from their perspective, they have the right to be the hegemon of the region because they've been there for 5,000 years, and most of these countries wasn't even there.
So let's run through the book, and it takes a very chronological approach, which so we can start at the beginning, and maybe some people will be surprised. Maybe people won't be, but maybe some people will be surprised to learn that the U.S. was actually the initial booster of an Iranian nuclear program under the Atoms for Peace program. Talk
Yeah.
about the earliest formation of an Iranian nuclear program.
So the start of the nuclear program was really thanks to the Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace program, and Iran was on the list of the recipients of Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace because Iran was an emerging ally for the United States. Iran, once the World War II ends, is trying to figure out what it is. It is barely standing on its feet as an independent nation, and the United States emerges as a reliable partner to fend off the threat of Soviet Union, which had just occupied Iran. So we have the 1955 Treaty of Amity and Commerce between Iran and the US. In 1957, we have the first nuclear agreement between Iran and the US. In 1959, we have a mutual defense agreement between Iran and the US, March 1959, which really said that the security of Iran is indispensable to the security of the United States, and vaguely promises a military intervention if Iran is attacked. But Iran was simply too underdeveloped at the time in 1950s to be able to afford an expansive program. It didn't have enough capacity to generate power to have, let's say, a nuclear power plant. So most of the equipment that the Iranians had received from the Americans were in storage collecting dust, right? But again, why the Shah started it? Because he actually wanted to show off to the Arab countries of the region that he has a nuclear program and they don't have one. And I actually spoke to an Iranian scientist, the first ever licensed nuclear engineer in Iran, who was able to operate the Tehran research reactor, which the US had given to Iran. And he told me that the Shah didn't know what he wanted. We didn't know what we wanted. The Shah simply wanted to have one. And just to show you the extent to which the Shah, everything was so symbolic, the Tehran research reactor went critical on the birthday of the Shah. So everything was about the Shah. He wanted to show off without knowing what he actually wants in the long term. But then he decides to sign the Partial Test Ban Treaty, the PTBT, which really said that if you're a member state, you could not test nuclear weapons in underwater, outer space, so on and so forth. And which makes you think, if you don't even have a nuclear power plant, why would you sign that? Or NPT, for example. There was no consultation whatsoever with Iran's national, with the nuclear communities or anybody. The Shah simply picks up the phone and tells his former son-in-law and ambassador to UK that go sign the NPT. So on the first day that the NPT was open for signature, he goes and signs the NPT.
I just want to say, I know, Danny, you can ask a question. It's hard to believe he got overthrown, really. I mean, such a keen
Such a
mind.
good guy.
Steel
Good guy,
trap, yeah.
keen mind, yeah. So why don't we move on to the immediate pre-revolutionary period, the 1970s, and how does the nuclear program proceed in the NPT is the late 1960s for people who don't know, right? 68, if I'm remembering
68,
correctly.
yeah.
Yeah. And so this is this big moment of we're finally 23 years, we're going to have some sort of international nuclear regulation. But how does the program proceed in the 70s, leading to, of course, the revolution?
Mhm. Well, just before I answer your question, I spoke to four Iranians, actually three Iranians, and I read the interviews that Akbar Etemad, the Shah's nuclear chief, had given. And all these Iranians think that the signing of NPT was a mistake for Iran. They point out to India and Pakistan, which were also developing countries, and they never signed the NPT because, from their perspective, from the Pakistanis and Indians' perspective, NPT was inherently discriminatory, which meant that some countries had certain rights and privileges that other developing nations didn't have it, and they didn't want to be treated like a second-class citizen. And these Iranians that I spoke with, all of them said that this was a mistake for Iran to sign the NPT. And Etemad had actually said that if I was in charge at the time, I would not have allowed this. But in any case, 1970s, Iran has a lot of money to spend because of the oil revenues of the 1970s. So what the Shah wanted to do was to buy anything that was expensive, luxury, and a symbol of westernization and modernization. And his real symbol, his role model, was France. Anything that France had done, the Shah wanted to do it too. So the first contract that Iran signs with a Western country to buy nuclear power plants was from France. And then they signed another agreement with West Germany to buy nuclear reactors from them. And all of these countries are getting in line to sell very expensive nuclear power plants to Iran. And everybody, including the Americans, are hailing the Shah's vision to replace fossil fuel for nuclear energy. And I'll say this, I'm jumping forward a little bit, but then I come back to the question. And all of these countries after the revolution went back and told Iranians that, oh, you have oil and gas. Why do you need nuclear technology? Why do you need nuclear energy? You have this as a fuel. So
Right.
in
It's become a point of suspicion now, right? Like, I mean,
exactly,
under the revolution, it's become like the only possible reason you might want this is for a nuclear weapon, like that.
absolutely.
That's where the rhetoric is.
And one of the motivations of these countries, the West Germans and French and the American side, was that they were trying to think how they can recycle some of Iran's oil revenues back to their economies. And what was the best approach? To persuade the Shah to diversify his energy plans. And the Shah was really thinking about the future of Iran. I mean, he was really looking ahead for 30 years from then, 20 years, 40 years from then. And his argument was that at some point in the future, we run out of oil. And what do we have to do? If we burn the fuel, oil as fuel, we can't sustain our economic development. So, what was the best approach? Again, nuclear energy. And all these countries are waiting in line to sell Iran nuclear reactors. The issue with the American side was that the Americans were really trying to push Iran to sign restrictions that went beyond the NPT requirements. And this came in the aftermath of India's peaceful nuclear explosion in May 1974. And what the American side was saying is, yes, this is beyond the NPT, but because we are concerned about the proliferation of nuclear weapons, we cannot let you decide what you're going to do with the spent fuel of the reactors that you have bought. So we have to make the decision for you. And the Shah and his nuclear chief Etemad, they were very offended by the US approach. And the Shah was quoted as saying, like, to, I think it was to Ford, that the US demands from Iran are a violation of our sovereignty. In any case, long story short, I've seen documents, and I cite them in my book, that by late 1977, early 1978, there was a secret program in Iran to work on nuclear weapons. I've cited three documents, intelligence documents that I found at the Carter Library, and I interviewed the late Joseph Nye, and he confirmed that he had seen the intelligence that there was a military group in Iran with a general in charge of that project that had begun works on development of nuclear weapons.
So I want to talk about this for another minute or two. The degree to what was the degree to which in what you found to which the Shah and Etemad and other Iranian officials regarded this change. I mean, it really feels like a major shift in US policy from like we're encouraging you, we're giving you the
Mhm.
Tehran reactor, we're doing all these things, to now like we have to clamp down on your nuclear
Yeah.
program. It feels like a major pull of the rug out from under the Iranians. How did they react to that? You talked a bit about it, but
Mhm.
go into some more detail
So I
about
think
that
that
piece of it.
Yeah, I think the turning point was May 1974 and India's PNE. And the US position at the time still remained that we do support your program. Kissinger hailed repeatedly how Shah is smart, he's a visionary, he wants to bring, modernization to Iran. And but the argument was, if we give Iran, the right to reprocess plutonium of its spent fuel, we have to give it to other people too. There's a concern that countries might develop nuclear weapons. And ironically, from what I've seen, Nixon and Kissinger were not really concerned about that. It was that they were under pressure, domestic pressure from inside the US, that we cannot give these so-called sensitive technologies to developing nations, because India's case showed that even developing nations, by using their own scientific capacity and expertise, can ultimately produce nuclear weapons. And India's example was a shock to the West because nobody took them seriously at the time. And they were concerned that, okay, maybe at some point in the future the Shah would also like to have nuclear weapons, and they wanted to stop it. This changed with the arrival of Ford, and especially the Carter administration, that really put a lot of pressure on the Shah to give up on the issue of reprocessing plutonium on Iranian soil.
And talk a little bit more about the impetus for this sort of, movement in the direction of developing nuclear weapons. Not full blown, but
Yeah,
the idea that they were interested in developing. There's a deterrent element of this, I gather, with regard to the Soviets. Although I think you write in the book, the Shah acknowledged that Iran was never going to have a
yeah,
nuclear arsenal the size that would actually deter the Soviets. But
that's
there
right.
is a historic, animosity, let's say, in that relationship that could help explain it. But what was the thinking around? We
Yeah.
want to have. Was it more on the side of like national prestige, or on the side of actual military utility?
I would say a combination. And as you pointed out, the Shah was concerned with the threat of Soviet Union, but he didn't imagine that Iran could defend against the Soviet Union. I had to cut out some parts of the book to reach the word limit, but in the original manuscript, I explained that the Shah's thinking at the time was that if Soviets invade Iran, all Iran can do was to slow down the Soviet advance until the Americans arrived with nuclear weapons. And I've also seen documents that Kissinger had ordered some war games that included defending Iran with nuclear weapons. But I had to cut it out. I didn't have enough room. But so anyway, the plan was that Iran, using its air force, would slow down the Soviet advance until the Americans arrived. At the same time, what the Shah did was to improve relations with the Soviet Union, including buying, for example, a steel factory from them, buying some non sensitive military equipment such as trucks, artillery, so on and so forth, to kind of ease tensions with the Soviets. What he was really concerned with was the Soviet aligned uh, Arab nationalist countries in the region, especially Iraq, which posed an acute threat to Iran's security. I have to keep in mind that Saddam Hussein was in charge. Iran and Iraq had problems, territorial disputes. Saddam had good relations with the Soviets. Saddam also had a nuclear program that the Shah was really concerned about, and his nuclear chief Etemad, that someday Iraq might want to get nuclear weapons. Now, at the time, the Shah thought that Iran's conventional military is enough to deter an Iraqi invasion, but he wanted to be ready for the day that Saddam might want to try to get nuclear weapons. And I cite an article from his former foreign minister Adeshir Zahedi's son-in-law, ambassador to the U.S. and the U.K. He wrote a piece in 2004, actually, that Iran's approach at the time was something that they called surge capacity, which in literature, in nuclear literature, it's about, they call it nuclear hedging, that Iran should be in a position to be able to get nuclear weapons if quickly, if the political decision is made. And his timeline, Adeshir Zahiri's timeline, his argument was that it was 18 months, that Iran has to be prepared for that day. But there was no active weaponization effort. But going back to your question, it was really the threat of Iraq that made the Shah very concerned.
So this, I think, brings us up to the revolution and the
Mhm.
problem in so many areas, not just this one, but the problem with the way that people in the U.S. tend to talk about the revolution is they treat it as a discrete event.
Mm.
Like on the one side you had the Shah, on the other side you had the religious establishment, and that was it. Like in a in a moment, everything changed. But you treat in the book, and I think especially with for the nuclear issue, but on a lot of other fronts as well, it makes sense to talk about this entire years long period of the revolution leading into
Mm.
the chaos that followed in the organization of the Islamic Republic, and then the Iran-Iraq War.
Yeah.
So maybe let's start with where it looks like the new leaders of Iran are going in the immediate aftermath of the revolution. Then we can get into how that changes over the rest of the decade.
Yeah. So one of the arguments that I'm making is that the kind of the hibernation of the Iranian nuclear program in the aftermath of the revolution, which I'll discuss shortly, was an abrupt moment. That was the kind of this is the conventional wisdom, but I actually show that this was not an abrupt decision, but rather the culmination of the events and the curtailment of everything in Iran because of fiscal problems. And I show that even under the Shah, the last year of the Shah's reign, some of the nuclear projects had to be stopped or put on hold because they didn't have money to spend on it. But when the Islamic Republic comes in, everything that the Shah had done was bad. Iran's military expenditure was bad. Every relationship with the West was bad. The nuclear program was also bad. Why? Because from their perspective, Iran, it would make Iran dependent on the West. And there's so much attack in the Iranian media, which I cite in the book, on the whole concept of having nuclear energy for the future of Iran. But then and they put someone, a geologist, in charge of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, or the AEOI, that he actually hated the program. He said, we don't need nuclear program for Iran, we don't need nuclear energy for Iran. But then you have the 1980s, the 1980 Iraq invasion of Iran, which fundamentally changes the security perception of the revolutionary leadership. They realized that all these military expenditure that Shah had done was all worth it. All the fighter planes that Iran had ordered was worth it. All the scientific experiments that Iranians had done was all worth it. So by 1981, 1982, there is a reassessment of the future of the nuclear program in the country. And Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, who later became president, becomes one of the most strongest proponents of the nuclear program. And he says, okay, this Bushehr plant that the West Germans were building in Iran, we have to finish it. But the problem is, some of it actually their own making. The hostage crisis, this very strong anti-imperialistic approach of the Islamic Republic had dissuaded a lot of countries from working with Iranians. And on the American side, the very same America that had hailed the Shah's nuclear program tried to stop every single country from helping Iran to finish the nuclear power plants, suggesting that, oh, Iran has oil and gas. Why do they need nuclear energy? At the same time, you have Iraq that, with really the green light of the Americans, of the Western countries, are using chemical weapons on Iranians on a daily basis. The Americans knew that Iraq is using nerve gas, mustard gas, and yet not only they didn't stop it, not only the Americans and the so-called international rules-based order didn't stop Iraq, but they supported it by giving Iraq the ingredients and the material for using chemical weapons on Iranians. And the thinking in Tehran at the time, and I spoke to a scientist who was involved in the program, was that Saddam is using chemical weapons on Iran, and he also has a nuclear program. What if they get nuclear weapons and they use one against Iran, and nobody's going to say anything to them? So what do we have to do? The only solution is to match that nuclear threat with a nuclear deterrent force for Iran. So that was the thinking that Iranian leadership had. and goes back to the same thinking that the Shah had, that one, international norms and the rules-based international order doesn't mean anything, international law doesn't mean anything, and two, Iran has to stand on its own feet to defend itself because nobody will come to its assistance. Now, if I may put my academic hat for a second, John Mearsheimer has put it very smartly that in international politics, God only helps those who help themselves, and that exactly captures what Iranians were thinking.
To talk more about the international piece of this in the sense of isolation, there is in the late '80s the decision that Iran needs to develop its own uranium enrichment capacity, which of
Yeah,
course is still a major issue today. And this comes after, I think, in the book, you talk about several attempts to reach out to European countries, to China, to
yeah.
to other countries to come in and support an Iranian nuclear program, only to have them either get cut off by the U.S. or just back out of their own
Mhm.
accord. So, can you talk a little bit more about the decision that Iran needs to control its entire fuel cycle and needs to
Yeah,
have this capacity that we're obviously still debating to the
yeah.
present day?
So there were two issues. One, Iran's approach to Western countries that would come and finish the projects or give Iran's the nuclear fuel that Iran had already paid for. And I actually cited in the book. So the Shah had given $1 billion to Eurodif, which was a consortium of a bunch of European countries to produce low enriched uranium, and Iran had 10% share in Eurodif. So after the revolution, they go to the Eurodif and say, "Okay, can you give us our the low enriched uranium that we paid for it?" And the Europeans' attitude rather is that, "Oh, well, you don't have a nuclear power plant. Why do you need low enriched uranium?" And Iranians would say, "Well, can you come and help us finish the project, the nuclear power plants that we have, nuclear reactors that we have?" And the European approach is, well, you have oil and gas. Why do you need nuclear energy? And Iranians would say, okay, fine. Can you at least give us our money back, the $1 billion that we paid you? And the European approach was, well, we're sorry, but there's a court order and we cannot give your money back. So Iranians were stuck in, between, chicken and egg story that they could never have any nuclear program in their country. So this is why they thought about going and mastering the nuclear fuel cycle themselves. And the second approach, which I kind of second issue, which I kind of mentioned it, was nobody was willing to help Iranians in sensitive topics, especially enrichment. The discussion on Chinese helping with Iran's enrichment, that's false. With the Russians, that's also false. So they had to do it on their own because it's a sensitive technology and nobody would actually export it. So Iranians had to do it, in a covert way of reaching to Europeans and trying to import the technology so they could do it on their own. And nobody thought that Iran could do it at the time. They thought Iranians are a bunch of backward, stupid people that they can't do it on their own. But they managed to do it.
And so let's talk about how things continue through the '90s,
Yeah,
leading up to obviously the glorious war on terror. But there is, two things. There are two things happening here. One is, as you said, there's this feeling coming out of the Iran-Iraq war that Iran needs to have some kind of deterrent capacity, that it
Mhm.
needs to control, it needs to develop its own domestic capabilities because nobody else is going to
Yeah,
help out. Um, but there's also, I think, I mean, people have talked about this. There's this idea that having come out of the Iran-Iraq war and seen, been the target of WMDs, I mean, Iraqi chemical weapons throughout that
yeah.
conflict, you do get the fatwa, the famous Khamenei fatwa against
Mhm.
nuclear weapons that seems to emerge from, partly from that sort of national experience. What are the discussions that are going on around nuclear issues, and how does the program kind of continue to develop before the turn of the century?
Well, look, every single Iranian that I spoke with during the Shah or after the Islamic Republic, they all denied that Iran ever pursued nuclear weapons. I interviewed someone, and I said, okay, well, I know that you say Iran didn't have nuclear weapons program, but I have some documents which I cite in the book, that IAEA documents, that Iran actually had a nuclear weapons program, or at least had done studies on different aspects of producing nuclear weapons. Off the record, can you tell me if Iran was pursuing nuclear weapons? And he said, no, on the record, off the record, we never wanted nuclear weapons. Another scientist that I spoke with, and this is under the Shah, they said there's absolutely no way that Iran was pursuing nuclear weapons at the time. But again, the documents that I cite in the book show that the Shah's military was secretly working on it. So the official narrative was that Iran never pursued nuclear weapons. And Khamenei's fatwa, I think, comes later. But look, for a country that its leadership strongly believe that they're alone and nobody comes to their help, and they were just gassed to death on a daily basis, it makes perfect strategic sense to have nuclear weapons. In fact, I think there was an Israeli prime minister, I think it was Ehud Olmert, who once quipped that I know Iran is pursuing nuclear weapons. And when he was asked why he thinks like that, he said, because it makes perfect strategic sense for them. So now, whether they were pursuing it actively, Iranians have always denied it. But I show in the book that they had an organized plan to develop a small nuclear arsenal, not to deter the United States, but rather to deal with the threat of Iraq. And then in 1990s, Israel emerges as a potential security threat.
So 9/11 happens, and
Mhm.
then Iran is very quickly placed on the axis of evil.
Mhm.
And I think one of the notions that it was related to nuclear weapons. Obviously, there's more, but that was one of the things that were sort of put into the stew of David Fromm's speech he wrote for W. So what happens after 9/11? How does Iran react to the global war on terror? How does this new framework of U.S. foreign policy shape the program?
Yeah. Well, very much scared from the rhetoric coming from Washington. I actually cite a quote from Hashemi Rafsanjani, who said that you have to be careful of a dinosaur that is guided by the brain of a sparrow. They were very much concerned with what the U.S. would do, and initially they cooperated with the Americans in Afghanistan. They shared intelligence with the Americans, and they helped the U.S. in kind of shaping the Hamid Karzai's government in Afghanistan. But then when the rhetoric started to shift, that Iran should get a number, for example, they thought that they're going to be on the list of U.S. strikes on the pretext of trying to develop nuclear weapons. So everything that they were doing, all these alleged studies on nuclear weapons, they shelved everything because they didn't want to be on the list, because they thought that even if they somehow manage to develop nuclear weapons, they cannot deter the United States with five small nuclear sites. I mean, if you want to deter a superpower with 5,000 nuclear weapons, you cannot do it with five small yield nuclear weapons. And by the way, you cannot deliver those nuclear weapons to the U.S. mainland. So they thought that this could be a pretext for a U.S. attack. So we're going to put everything aside. We're going to talk to the Americans. They tried a few times, most famously the so-called Grand Bargain, which I think they offered it on May 4th or March 4th, 2003. But the Americans simply ignored them. And in that offer, Iranians had placed a lot of things on the table, including full transparency on the nuclear program, helping Hezbollah becoming a purely political organization working within the constitution of Lebanon. But Vice President Dick Cheney and Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld said that we don't negotiate with evil. And so, I mean, the only option that the Iranians had at the time was to talk to the Europeans. And they go to the Europeans, and I cite a very interesting quote from Jack Straw, the former British Foreign Secretary, who said that we are here as your human shields. And so they start negotiating with the Europeans just to avoid a confrontation with the Americans. And this is why, again, I'm trying to show that the leadership in Iran, they're not religious lunatics. They think about their world. They calculate the costs and benefits. They understand that they cannot win a full confrontation with the United States.
I think that's it's maybe worth talking a bit about the opportunities that the U.S. missed in this
Mm-hmm.
period, and there's a tendency, again, in the U.S. to talk about the missed opportunities simply being, those first few years after 9/11, when
Yeah.
the Khatami government was in power and really seemed to be, as you said, cooperated after 9/11, would seem to be interested in engagement with the West. But even under Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who, if you only know him from his, NBA tweets or his basketball prognostication, like, you may not realize that he was like the devil incarnate for a while in Western
Yeah.
media and Western conceptions
Yeah.
of geopolitics. Even under Ahmadinejad, who was considered this rabid, hardline, anti-West, doesn't want anything. The nuclear negotiations with the Europeans continued. Like, there was still a conversation going on, and yet nothing. The Americans, I think, were the main reason why nothing was able to progress from that.
Yeah, I mean, look, Ahmadinejad pretended to be anti-West, but he was the one who wanted to improve relations with the United States. He wrote letters to George W. Bush. His first arrival in for the UN General Assembly, he specifically asked Zarif to make arrangements for meetings with American senators because he wanted to be the guy who changed relationship with the U.S. He would do anything to get the attention of the Americans, but because of his politics, because of the things that he had said about Israel, Holocaust, he was a radioactive material and nobody wanted to talk to him or be seen with him. Now, what happened on the nuclear file was that in the last months of Khatami presidency, these agreements that the Iranians had reached with the Europeans, they couldn't get the benefits of those agreements because the Europeans, the E3, needed a green light from the American side to be able to offer Iranians something. But thanks to no one but John Bolton, who scuttled the agreements effectively, the negotiations and the agreements that Iranians had with the Europeans didn't go anywhere. So Iranians realized that they are doing their part of the bargain, but the Europeans are not delivering. Again, we saw this under the JCPOA. And so the decision in Iran is made, which I actually cite that meeting in my book, that look, we need to restart the program and put pressure on the Europeans. So under Khatami, they had two red lines of one, avoid being referred to the Security Council, and the second red line was Iran's right under the NPT. Now, when Ahmadinejad comes in the transition period of the summer of 2005, the decision is made by Ahmadinejad that to ditch the red line of being referred to the Security Council and focus on expanding the nuclear program to force the Europeans and the Americans to accept Iran's nuclear reality. And one of the people that I spoke with, he said, from Ahmadinejad's perspective, the best defense was to go on offense. So this is why you see there's a rapid expansion of the Iranian nuclear program. And every time there is a UN Security Council resolution or a unilateral sanction by either the US or the Europeans, Iran escalates on the nuclear front. So from the period in 2003, Iran, I think it had 164 centrifuges. By the time that JCPOA was signed, they had 19,000 centrifuges. And I'll say one more thing about the number of centrifuges, which I just remembered. In the negotiations that the Iranians had with the Europeans, Iranians were begging, and I'm emphasizing the word begging, to have 14 or 16 centrifuges, IR1 centrifuges. But the Europeans said, no, sorry, we can't. You cannot have centrifuges operating, and we can't allow you to have one. And this is why Iran says, okay, to hell with you. We're going to go and we're going to expand the program.
So let's move through, kind of late Bush and early Obama,
Mm-hmm.
Up to the JCPOA. The perception again that you push back on in this book is that the JCPOA was the result of strong American pressure, through the sanctions, through the treatment that we administered to Iran in these
Mm-hmm.
years leading up to 2015, and that forced political changes inside Iran. Maybe you could trace Hassan Rouhani's election and talk about that as a turning point. But the real turning point is the Obama administration acknowledging that Iran has real nuclear ambitions here, not weaponization, but they want a nuclear program. This isn't like a threat that they're dangling over the West, or like they just want to nuke to cause the apocalypse or whatever. Like there's a real national element to this, and giving the concession or the acknowledgement, especially on enrichment, but just generally speaking, acknowledging these desires, and that's what leads to the breakthrough of the JCPOA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, the Bush administration position was zero enrichment. I'll go. Let me go a little further back. Under the Clinton administration, the official U.S. policy was zero nuclear programs in Iran. Absolutely, I actually have a quote from Warren Christopher that said, "Oh, we don't want Iranians to have any nuclear program, and everything had to be wrapped up because we don't want Iranians to have the knowledge of nuclear technology." So that didn't happen. The Bush administration comes in and says, okay, well, fine, a little nuclear program is fine, but zero enrichment. And why the Bush administration decides that some nuclear program is okay? Because Condi Rice realized, and this is her words, her exact quote was that our policy on Iran was dead in the water, right? So they tell the Russians, okay, here's the green light. If you want to go and finish the Bushehr reactor, it's fine, no problem, but zero enrichment. But Iranians would not accept zero enrichment. They were pushing for it until Obama comes in and, as you pointed out, correctly realizes that without some enrichment capacity, they're not going to get a deal with Iran. And this is something that Europeans had long learned and had realized it. And they were telling the Americans that, look, if you want a peaceful solution to this crisis, you have to let Iranians have some level of enrichment because it is fact on the ground. You can't change this anymore, right? And this is why we're seeing that there's a shift in the Obama administration's policy that some level of enrichment is okay if Iran accepts intrusive inspections and major caps on its nuclear program. On the issue of whether sanctions were helpful in changing the calculation or not, look, this is open to debate. What I do know is that both Iranians and the West, the P5+1, if you will, had reached a point of not being able to exercise more leverage by adding more of their own pressure. I mean, Iran's nuclear program had reached a point where they couldn't add more leverage on the nuclear program to pressure the West, and the West had done everything it could to sanction Iranian economy And one of the resolutions that I think was very effective was the UN Security Council Resolution 1929, which implicitly authorized the use of force against Iran. That made some Iranian decision makers, including Zarif, which, by the way, I refer to him in the book, his analysis, his assessment that was sent to the leadership, to think that, look, what the Americans are trying to do is to legally ban Iran's nuclear program forever. And we have to change this. This is why you're seeing that some elements in Iran's political leadership thought that we need to change our approach. But that didn't happen until Obama sent a signal to Iranians that, okay, some enrichment is fine.
So I think this brings us, of course, to the Trump and then Biden
Oh,
administrations, and sort of the leaving of the deal.
yeah.
Um, why Biden didn't immediately resuscitate it, and obviously this lead up to the war.
Well, I mean, look, both Iranians and Americans squandered a great opportunity to come back to full compliance after Trump had withdrawn. The Iranian side was thinking that, look, we stayed committed to the agreement. It was the Americans who violated the deal. And by the way, everyone in Washington and the US in general were saying that, oh, Iran is going to cheat on the agreement. They're just liars, they're deceptive in nature. There's no way Iranians are going to abide by the deal, which they did, by the way, and it was the U.S. that violated the agreement. Some people may not want to hear it, but evidence suggests otherwise. So Iranians were saying, look, it was the U.S. that violated the deal. If the Americans come back, we're going to come back to full compliance too. But the American side in Washington, Biden was thinking of something else. It was the COVID pandemic. He needed the Congress to pass funding. It needed Congress and Democratic senators to uh, 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 approve the high-ranking officials in the State Department and elsewhere, and he didn't want to antagonize the senators. So a lot of time and really golden opportunity was wasted just saying, oh, if the other side comes in first, we're going to go first, we're going to go too. But by the time that the decision was made to restart the negotiations, Iranians were going through their own election cycle. And now, late Supreme Leader Khamenei didn't want Rouhani to have a win while he's leaving the office. The hardliners didn't want that opportunity. They were attacking anyone who they thought could potentially run in the election. They started attacking Zarif, for example. He didn't have any presidential ambitions, but they started attacking him just to make sure that he's out. And this is why we saw that despite the inclination to reach a deal under the Rouhani administration, it didn't happen. And Rouhani specifically said that if we had allowed Araqchi, now Foreign Minister Araqchi, to finish to sign the agreement, we would have been in a different position.
So I think, Sina, I mean, there's a lot more we could talk about. We're coming up to an end point, and I did say we were going to try and incorporate recent events into this,
Yeah.
which go beyond the scope of your book. There's a lot that we don't know, obviously, about what's going to happen here, whether there is even going to be a grand deal that emerges at the end of the negotiations that are taking place. We don't. I mean, I would say, and please, point me in the other direction if I'm wrong, but I would say we don't really have a great sense for the Iranian leadership right now, given how many senior officials were killed in the course of this war and how much turnover, including Ali Khamenei. I mean,
Yeah.
Mojtaba Khamenei is now the supreme leader. I think it still needs to be seen how that's going to function, how they're going to function in, let's say, peacetime charitably. It's not really
Mhm.
that yet, but there's a lot of, I'm just saying, there's a lot of unknowns basically about
Yeah.
what comes next. But as you are looking at things. And again, you wrote an epilogue after the 12-day war. I guess I'm wondering what you would say if you were writing a new epilogue to the book in the wake of what we've just seen over the last few months.
Well, I would say that despite all the killing, all the destruction, ultimately you cannot bomb the uh, ambitions of Iranians. You cannot bomb away their institutional knowledge and industrial capacity. If the US wants any peaceful agreement with Iran, and I think this war was one of the most, uh, 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 let's say, stupidest decisions in US foreign policy in the last 50 years, um, was to start this war. I think if you want a resolution without getting a deal on the nuclear issue and some level of enrichment in Iran, you cannot resolve that. The Trump administration, I mean, Trump himself last year in June 2025, he claimed that the Iranian nuclear program has been completely destroyed. Okay, but he also started a war on February 27 to deal with the threat of the Iranian nuclear program. I mean, only one of these statements can be true, whether there was a complete destruction of the Iranian nuclear program or there wasn't. One of them is false. And at any time, Iranians, despite all the assassinations that the Israelis and the Americans have done in Iran, look, they know how to make things. It's the only country in the Persian Gulf region that has the industrial capacity to do it on its own. And again, this is why it is so important to them. And ultimately, they can rebuild the program. And the argument of the book, which I think it sets with whatever is happening right now, is that um, you can bomb away the institution, you can bomb away the factories, but you cannot bomb away their institutional knowledge. You can have intrusive inspections in Iran. You can have strong caps and limitations on the scope of the program, and I think Iranians are open to it. But you cannot tell Iranians. I mean, you can tell them, but they're not going to accept it. That zero enrichment, zero nuclear program. I mean, if you tell Iranians, "Oh, well, we'll sell you a light water reactor and we give you the fuel," Iranians are going to trust you because of the experiences of the past. I mean, how many times the Europeans told them, "Oh, we're gonna, build this, great nuclear reactor for you," and never arrived. They paid for it, but it never arrived. So they learned that they have to do it on their own, and that's their view. And I think a good deal with Iran is a deal that ensures that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons, but also gives Iranian something to sell at home. Unless the Trump administration wants an unconditional surrender document, which Iranians are not going to sign, you have to give them something.
I think that's a good place to leave it. Sina, thank you so much again for coming on the program. We always value having you and your insight about these topics. And again, the book is Iran and the Bomb, the United States, Iran, and the Nuclear Question. We'll have a link in the show description. Go pick it up, folks. Thanks, Sina.
Thanks for having me.